Video games over the last few years have been more accessible than they ever been before. Can you believe that people used to go to a local mall, walk into a GameStop, and buy a game? Such as technology, writing, art, music, and life, we progress and our old way becomes nothing more than a faded memory. As well as we look into the future, but it doesn't take away the value from these works of art. So, I ask you, dear viewer, how do we preserve video games? Re-releases? Well, what if the game is really dead? Or it's on a platform that's hard to find? What if the developer studio is long gone and no one wants to pick up the game? Then all you would have to do is buy these games from third parties or watch full videos on them and never actually get a chance to check it out. So, if you do have these games and you want a way to preserve them, how would you store them? Emulation. The discussion of emulation is a very debated topic in the game community, as it opens up the gates for piracy, basically the practice of legally downloading games in order to play them without actually paying, similar in the 2000s when people would pirate music. However, for today, I would like to argue that emulation is a tool that we can use to empower the media and could also help new gamers and other such experience the past work. I used to emulate games when I was younger. I had a 360 in some games and some older brothers. However, as much as I played them, I got pretty burnt out and needed some new games, but I could never really afford any of these games since I was a young child and the proposition of getting my parents to pay $60 wasn't really an option. So I wanted to play some old GBA games like Pokemon that I had in the past. However, this was in the DSi and soon 3DS era. So tell me, how would one get a GBA to play Pokemon Fire Red without going to a thrift shop and paying almost the same price as a newer gen console? Thus, my journey led me into emulation. Games that people in their high school or college years at that time, like my brothers, would consider their childhood games. Games that they played years ago. This gave me a connection with my brothers as I wanted to get more closer, specifically with my oldest brother, and they had an N64 and the GBA. Now, before I go any further, I want to give a little bit of detail of what setup I had to emulate these games. Growing up, when I was getting into 5th grade, I got a Samsung tablet from my grandmother. With this actually really did help with some traveling times, as well as some travel that my family did from here and there. On that tablet, I was able to get a GBA, N64, and SNES emulator. Later, when I got an iPhone, I was able to get a PSP emulator somehow. The big appeal with this is that I was able to play most of these games on the go, which was a good thing, especially since I had much travel. With that travel came with a lot of time without any Wi-Fi. Although the mobile games on the tablet were fun, they were nothing compared to the handcrafted art pieces that I played on those emulators. So let's go ahead and start with the GBA, as that had the huge amount of impact on me today. I played a lot of games on the GBA. It was the most accessible emulator out there. Of course, I did also play the games that many consider were must-haves, like Pokemon Fire Red, Emerald, and other such. However, the main ones that stuck into my head were Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga and Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap. The Minish Cap and the Zelda series as a whole, I would like to make a whole separate video in regards to my experience with them, as I don't think putting them in this video would do them justice. However, for Mario & Luigi, that's held my childhood the most when I was traveling. The turn-based combat, as well as the trademark Bros attack, requiring you to time the button press, was a great refresher, especially for most standard RPGs at that time. The story was wacky, and the characters in them had me hooked to the point where when I got a 3DS, it was one of the first games I picked up, Dream Team. Later, when my brother got a DSi from his classmate, I would get Bowser's Inside Story, and finally Partners in Time. If I still had a 3DS around that time, before it broke, I probably would have got some of the newer games like Paper Jam. However, I would have never gotten into the series and the amazing music if I never emulated the first game in the first place. The Bowser Castle and Superstar Saga was the most heat I had listening to while in my Spanish country. The N64 was great. Its games were one of a kind and a lot of them had soul in them. Of course, I played Mario 64 and it was amazing getting all the stars, although I was never able to really beat the game until way later. But it was Conker's Bad Fur Day that I really wanted to play. The last game Conker was ever in was a remake made on the OG 360 and a demo that I released around 2015. However, word around the N64 community was that this game was really mature and pretty much held no punches, and it was also made by the makers of Banjo-Kazooie, which held it even more in regards to me, as I loved those games. Although Conker's age not the greatest, but it is still a very novelty of its time when it came out. If it was released today, it would probably be labeled as a very edgy game, to be edgy. The gameplay takes a bunch of twists and turns, which are cool. However, on repeat playthroughs, they tend to be a bit of a drag for me. I'm still really glad I was able to play this. However, this also is a great time to point out when companies release new re-releases, as now Conker is way more accessible than when I started playing him back in like 2015-ish. Rare released a Rare Replay into where they included Conker, so now it's a lot more accessible than it was to where it was only available on the N64 and the OG Xbox, which was the remake that many say was a very much downgrade. While there are other games I would like to touch base on, like Super Mario RPG and Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, however, these games are a lot more accessible, or might be in the future. Switch Online. However, for this final section, I wanted to talk a little bit how Nintendo has been handling such as these actions. Most people, like myself, would be happy to pay and legally attain some of these games that they have in their catalog if it was an option. Let's take the GameCube for example. Children that play the GameCube are in their 20s, they're working adults, and some of them want to relive their childhood. However, Switch Online doesn't support these games at the moment. However, at the pace they're going at, it's probably never going to happen, meaning that the only way to play some of these games was to go buy a GameCube or a Wii, both of which Nintendo doesn't really make profit of now these days, not in the slightest. So, tell me, if a company doesn't even sell the product you're even looking for, how are you even going to get it? If you're a film student and you're doing a paper on the trip to the moon back in 1902, without Apple TV, HBO Max, and some other ways, like for example school, how are you going to be able to watch and study this film? By looking it up online and watching it on YouTube. To be honest, the point of this is just to kind of make fun of Nintendo for beating up their fans and making sure that I don't get new ones, especially when they punish them for posting music that don't even have an official soundtrack to listen to. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and until next time, why don't you check out these doubloon videos while you're here.